Peace and blessings, everybody. Shalom, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Universal God Message of Peace. I'm Lalit Tansa. This is Rabbi Lee Wiseman and Dr. Khalid Zaheer. And they are both, in my opinion, excellent religious leaders and teachers and role models for their communities and beyond. Today, we're going to be discussing the topic of what makes a good religious leader. What are the qualities of a good religious leader? And this week, Rabbi Wiseman will be starting, God willing. So over to you, Rabbi Wiseman.
Thank you so much. So the actual title was "What Makes a Good Religious Teacher," um, which is a slightly different topic. But so we're going to go with teacher for the moment. Very often they're the same thing, but not always. Very often they're the same thing, but not always. So we'll start from the teaching end.
Okay.
Um, so I think the first thing is I think the first quality that we look for in a religious teacher is the quality of humility. And that's fairly easy to see. Um, Not in, whether they look at the ground a lot or whether they speak, humbly about themselves. And there's a very simple indicator, and that is how many times they say, I don't know. That's okay. If you want to see whether or not your teacher is humble, it's very simple. How many times do they say, I don't know? Because the nature of things is that there are a lot of things we don't know. We are not we're far from infallible. We're far from all knowing, and there are a lot of things that we don't know. And any teacher who pretends to know everything, that's a big red flag. But somebody who's willing to say, "Hey, I don't know. I'll find out. I'll try to, let me think about this a little bit." Or a person who, when you ask them a question, they pause for a little while, right? And don't give you an immediate answer to allow for themselves to think. Those are all very good signs. It's really important for a person to be able to say, I do not know. Especially when you're dealing with religious issues. We are finite beings trying to understand an infinite reality. We're trying to understand something which is very far beyond ourselves. And so, therefore, we have to have a certain sense of humility, but also to understand there are things we're not going to be able, there are things that we're not going to understand. And we have to be honest about that, and we have to be sincere about that. So that's number one. Um, a second thing is I think that a good religious teacher understands that students pay as much attention to what they do as to what they say. Um, very often, sometimes, sometimes you see people who may preach about something, but when you look at their personal behavior, you see how they act. It seems to be very far away from what it is that they're teaching. And so it's really important to embody in your behavior. Per, Now, nobody does this all the time. Nobody's asking, we can't expect uh, teachers to be superhumans. Of course, they're not superhumans. You can't hold somebody to the standard that they're never going to get upset, they're never going to get angry, they're never going to be sad. Of course, that's not reasonable. They have to be human beings. We all have to get to be human beings, but at the same time, I think a good religious teacher is able to share those struggles and say, you know what, the other day I faced this kind of a problem, and this is I got angry, and this is how I dealt with it. This is how I handled it. Is able to deal with able to deal with their humanity and manage their humanity in a way that helps other people understand how to deal with and manage their humanity too. And um, and reflects in their behavior the best of what it is that they teach in the best ways possible, right? In the best ways possible. Related to that, I think, um, is and this is and maybe this is a personal I can't tell whether this is a personal preference or not. It may be a personal preference, but I'm just gonna give it as a personal opinion. Um, I think the one way that we see one better quality of a religious teacher has to do with the kinds of things that they choose to talk about. Do they choose to talk about things which are real and which are important to people and which are vital to people's moral moral being and spiritual development, or do they talk about minutia? I find that a lot of religious teaching is about minutia. Um, and and in particular a ritual minutia. And I personally don't find that particularly useful. If a person wants an answer about a little piece of ritual minutia, that's something they can come and they can ask, and they can get reasons and so forth. But certainly in public teaching, I think it's much better to address things which are of a more general nature, which are going to be, and in particular things, and I think between human being and human being. I feel like the emphasis sometimes on ritual, the emphasis on what takes place between man and God, can sometimes leave those relationships between human beings uh, a little a little neglected. Like how many people, people will know the laws of prayer, right? They'll know, okay, I have to hold my hands this way, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to stand this way, and so forth. But how many people really know the laws of business? How many people know, um, what constitutes integrity in business, and what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, um, in business. Um, those are things which are really, really important. That's an important thing. Or know about, for example, relationships between husband and wife. What are kind of the appropriate parameters for a relationship between husband and wife? Right? That's going to be a lot more important to people ultimately than long discussions about how they hold their hands in prayer, or in how they stand, or how many prayers to say and when to say them, and the various rewards for all the various prayers, which seem to take up a lot of space, take up a lot of space in people's teaching, but those are not necessarily useful. So part of it is also uh, in the choice, I think, of what a person teaches. Um, Another point, and this is maybe a little controversial, is I think it's important for the teacher to impart to try to empower their students to find new insights. It can't be that we teach in such a way that we say, okay, everything is already known, right? Everything is already known. And I'm just going to reveal to you, I'm going to hand to you on a silver platter everything that is already known, but not expect you to add anything new to it, because there would be no point then, right? There's no point. There's no point in the teaching, right? What do you need a human being? What do you need an oral tradition, so to speak, for? What do you need the relationship between teacher and student if nothing new is going to come out of it? If nothing fresh and nothing living is going to come out of it. So we keep on talking about everything that everybody said in the past, but we have to also allow the space and the time for students to be able to question, right? For students to be able to question, but also for students to be able to derive their own opinions and to start and to understand things for themselves. And I truly believe that any human being can have an insight that was never seen before, right? We have, even though we have years and years and years and years and years of scholars who have been going over the text and going over the text and going over the text, um, that does not mean that there's nothing new to find. Of course, there's something new to find, right? Especially if we're talking about scripture, right? Which is again, right, the product of an infinite mind, right? The product of an infinite mind. So something which is a product of the infinite, right? We can't expect it to have finite meaning, right? So therefore, it's going to keep unfolding and unfolding. We're going to find new things in it. And I'll make this last so I don't talk too much. Um, is that I I lost my train of thought. I had one more thing. Um, I forgot what my one more thing was. Okay, it's been a long day. It'll come to me. It'll come to me once you ask me anything. It'll come to me immediately. So, I'll take some questions on what on so far, and then the last thing will come.
It does happen sometimes,
It
that things slip out of your mind and then you start talking and then they
it'll
come
come
back.
back. It'll
Yeah.
come back.
But honestly, I must admit that, whatever you said, uh, I was not expecting it, except for probably the second point. I had jotted down 4 points. I would have expected that a teacher, religious teacher, is deeds and words should match.
Mm-hmm.
But the other three, I mean, they're amazing, honestly. Uh, I, if you would have asked me to do it first, I wouldn't have said them, but they're so very important. I mean, humility. I now endorse what you're saying. I mean, that's if I'm looking for a teacher, particularly a religious teacher, uh, I should I should look at this this particular aspect, mm, probably more than any other, because quite often what we see in the religious world, not pointing at any one particular person or a group, honestly, lack of humility has caused so much of damage. Uh,
Yeah.
this world would have been much better place to live in had all or most religious leaders been humble. I quite agree with you now. So that's great. Um, and I do agree with you that the choice of topics is important. I mean, you know better than me that the kind of influence uh, a religious leader enjoys. My goodness, I keep telling people that uh, forget about the politicians, forget about even the monarchs or any other entity, a military general. My goodness, the kind of influence, impact, power that a religious teacher enjoys, nobody else enjoys it because they are just next to the prophets. The prophets are not there. So I mean, it's so immense, so strong. And if they start talking about topics which are, you know, unworthy of being talked about so much,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you can imagine what kind of society is going to get designed, created as a consequence. So I quite agree with you. Uh, they really need to be so very careful in what they are saying and what they're choosing to say on. And my goodness, this last point that you raised was, I mean, amazing. That a teacher should actually empower the students, those who are listening to him and attending his presentations, to add to what he's saying, um, not just questioning, but giving their own opinions. And I mean, you're so very right that you would quite often be surprised, pleasantly surprised that uh, the people that you are trying to teach would come up with explanations, understandings, and insights you could never have thought of. But then I must say that this probably is only going to be possible if the teacher has the first ability, the first attribute, which is humbleness. I mean, if
Yes,
he's not humble, he would say, "How on earth, how the hell do you dare say that?
right.
You add to my knowledge." So I think this all of
Uh,
this is wonderful, and
and
whatever I have said, I hope is going to help you in thinking about the last point that you were.
And I can't, it's interesting. I can't tell you how many times I have heard exactly those words. I mean, how dare you? I mean, seriously, it is, or at least in one way or another, that message comes off a lot, and it's very toxic. Also, I mean,
It
if
is.
you talk to people, you know, if you talk to people who have left religion, you know, especially people who have been educated, and you say to yourself, how is it possible that somebody who was so educated, somebody they left, is many of them will tell you it was because of an experience like this, because they came up with an insight, they came up with something, they came up with a question, and they were told, how dare you ask that question? They were told, how dare you challenge me? How dare you? And they just said, like, this is, if this is what it is, right? If this is what it is, then who wants to be part of that, right? You know who wants to be trapped into a system in which you're not allowed, and which you're not allowed to think. So I remember my last point. My
That's great.
I told you it happened. Um, my last point was that we have to understand that religious teaching is not like other teaching. So we already said that in a way, because part of one of the important points is to, and I said before, and that is to understand that they're studying the teacher, right? They're not just studying what you're saying. So they're watching you. So that's something important to know as a religious teacher. The other thing to know is that it's not one size fits all. You know, very often we have, like, in education, we have an idea of a curriculum, right? And there are two kinds of teachers. There are teachers who teach the curriculum, and there are people who teach students, right? There are people who will say, okay, this is my material, right? This is my material, and my job is to get across material, right? I'm teaching this book, right? I'm teaching this book, and I'm going to teach this book, right? And and whether or not the students are understanding, whether or not the students relate to it, whatever the experience of the students, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to do the same thing no matter what. When religious teaching, we have to understand that each person comes with an entirely different set of equipment, right? We don't come, we come very, very different. Spirituality involves every part of you, your emotional makeup, right? Your emotional makeup, your intellectual makeup, your physical makeup. There's all sorts of things that go into that your spiritual life really is at the center of is really at the center of uh, of many other kind of factors in a person's personality. And so it is never going to be one size fits all. You're not going to be able to pick one kind of teaching and expect it to work for everybody. You're not going to be able to give one message and expect that one message to hit everybody's heart, but each person's heart is different. And so the message has to be shaped for that person. And even in religious rulings, right? Forget about, let's be legal for a second. So even in legal rulings, you have to take you have to take into account who you are talking to, right? And what their situation is, right? You don't want to put, even in business law, okay? If somebody did something wrong, right? And fixing it, right? And fixing it would cause a catastrophic loss to that person, then you might try to find another way to solve that problem, right? Even though that might be the normal legal way to solve the problem, right? Would be just, we're going to take the money away from this person, give the money to this person. But if it's going to leave this person, it's going to leave this person with nothing, you're not going to do that. So there has to be context sensitivity when it comes to law, but certainly when it comes to teaching, you really have to pay attention to who you are talking to. Know who your student is, know what it is, know what it is they need, and help try to provide them with what they need, not just what you want to give, right? Not just what you want to. Very often we use the expression in English, right? The Jewish people use the expression to give over. It's a translation of a Hebrew verb lemaser, right? To give over. And you say, well, what did I do? What did you do? I says I gave over some text. Well, it doesn't really work that way. It actually doesn't work that way. Teaching is not a passive transmission of something to another. It's it's going to be shaped by your intellect. And I thought of one other thing that I wanted to add, and that is that a good teacher talks about what they are for and not about what they are against. Um, Very often, if you hear a teacher and the teacher is constantly railing against somebody else, and all of their teaching is kind of used as a blade against somebody else, that is never a good sign. Somebody who's able to say, okay, this is my perspective, this is how I understand things, and is able to explain their perspective, without having to talk down anybody else. I think that's a sign of a very good teacher. On the other hand, a person who can only explain their position by tearing down somebody else, I think that's a sign of a bad teacher. And I think it's also a sign of a lack of humility, because a person who's humble is going to understand that other people also have their perspectives. Other people may see things differently in a different world, and it's not their business to be tearing other people down. It's the business to be building up their students. Okay, now I'm done.
Great additions, the last two that you've made. I'm glad that you made them. The individual attention given to individuals and should not be not or general always. And the other one is, I mean, you're right. I mean, religious teachers are very likely to talk against others rather than to talk for what they stand for. When I'm going to ask you questions, I'm being a little selfish because, the thought that comes to me is that when I'm going to now ask you questions, I might lose some of the points that I have to speak next time because this is going to be but never mind, inshallah, God will help me. Uh, what? Because I might find that everything has already been talked about. So what
Oh
on earth
no,
am I going to do? No,
you'll
but
find,
but
you'll
this
find,
is
you'll
an
find.
important point. I want your perspective on it. I'm talking about a particular teacher that has influenced me very strongly. He has a feature. I have a feeling that one part of that, you know, personality probably is slightly or somewhat problematic, but the other part is amazing.
Mhm.
And I'm more interested in the other part, but I think I would want your comments on the first part as well. The first part is what you quite often find in many teachers, religious teachers in particular, probably something which is unavoidable, or else nobody's going to listen to you.
Mhm.
And that is, when they speak and they mention their opinions, they're supremely confident.
Yeah.
It seems as if that what they are saying is the very last word on this subject that could have been said.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, probably there is some responsibility of those who are listening as well, that they should just discount the confidence that is coming from the statements. They should look at the contents and the argument, but not everybody is that bright, unfortunately. So people, when they see that a person is confident and is shouting and is making
Mhm.
statements which give you an impression that this is the very last word. The other side is that the gentleman that I'm particularly, have in mind, uh, despite the fact that whatever he says very confidently. But my goodness, I mean, he has no problems in admitting and accepting the next day that, I wasn't right. Uh, I I realized that the right point of view is what I'm telling you, because I was at fault, which I think is something important. It's again amazing.
Mhm. I think so
Uh,
too.
Now you are uh, guiding others, and you also should be the one who also needs and should seek guidance. Uh, but the first part is what is sometimes that makes me wonder that could it not be that the tone could have been softened a bit, and uh, you know one could have said with a bit of maybe humility in speech.
It's funny. It's funny you should say that. I'm guilty of this. Uh, uh honestly, I've seen myself do this because I do speak in public fairly often, right? And when I speak in public, especially if it's a bigger group, I find myself being very authoritative, right? And afterwards, somebody will come up to me and they will say to me, you know, you didn't get that right, or you didn't quote, you quoted that wrong, or right, or I think you took that in a strange direction, and I hope, that usually I am, humble enough to say, oh yeah, yeah, that's right, you know, and yeah, you got me. It's true. I messed up. But then the question that I have for myself is the question you asked. I mean, like, so why do I have to be so authoritative? And I think it's part of it is like a certain speaking style, and a kind of like a need to feel, to fill the role of teacher in that moment. And part of the role of teacher in that moment is like to it's authority. But I think that expressing a certain degree of humility, in the, is a good thing. Um, I nowadays, um, whenever I start a talk, um, in synagogue, I always begin by saying, says the Torah is perfect and I am not. You know, the Torah is perfect and I am not. And if I make any mistakes, if I make any mistakes, the mistakes are mine and not mistakes of the Torah. They're not, they're my mistakes. And I take responsibility for them. uh, and that reminds me to kind of chill out. But at least, the person can be corrected. Of course, there are people who can never be corrected and who will insist that they were right, even when it's clear that they were wrong, right? Because of their egos. So that at least is a good, that at least is a very good quality. Um, you know.
Right. Uh, it's very interesting. Uh, uh, I observed that common people are more uh, inclined to listen to somebody who is confident and who
Yeah.
sounds confident, because probably, well, quite understandably, they would want to hear something which is coming with authority, and there is this uh, very clear understanding that the person believes in what he is saying to be the truth. uh, I had the occasion of making a presentation somewhere, and after my presentation there were two or three people who approached me, and they said that, look here, what you said was okay, it was quite uh, understandable, and it was okay. But why did you have to say every now and then that, in my humble opinion? Just say it with confidence. Now,
And
I
that
think it's a utopian, uh, you know, understanding or expectation that people would just look at the merit of the argument, no matter how it is presented. But that's not the case. That's not how it happens. It doesn't work out that way. Quite as much the strength of your argument, probably even more, is the forcefulness of the way it is presented. But I think some balance should be struck, and I think one of the points that you've mentioned, uh, I'm actually I'm actually referring to it, that this empowering aspect that you mentioned. Um, a good teacher, should enable the students to look for the strength of arguments rather than the forcefulness of presentation. That that
Mm.
quality should get better amongst the students and the listeners and those who are reading. And I think this is what a good teachers do. It's amazing how your level of critical analysis improves when you are being guided by good teachers. But yeah, I mean, this aspect of uh, humbleness is tricky. It is something that really has to be done in a balanced way.
when you said that, I struggle with this all the time. There are times, and I've criticized myself for this on both directions. Sometimes I listen to myself speak and I think to myself, why do you keep saying, in my opinion? Because it's obvious it's in your opinion. It's obvious. You're the one speaking, so it must be your opinion, right? But then I think to myself, no, no, no. It, I don't want people to think that this is like the opinion of God. Like this is, because of what I'm talking about, right? It's easy to forget that it's my opinion and to think that somehow or another this is some absolute truth. Okay? And if I know that it's not an absolute truth, I know that this is my take and my understanding, even if it's shared by lots of other people, right? Even if it's shared by lots of other people, still, right? Still, if I'm choosing among different opinions or different perspectives, I'll say, okay, this is how I understand it. But no question that in the minds of some that weakens your argument, right? But I'm okay with that if it's weakening the argument in the sense that, oh no, no, wait, this isn't the voice on high from Mount Sinai, then I'm okay with that, right? Because I don't want to be the voice from on high from Mount Sinai, right? I think that the people who do that, they often, they you attract all sorts of people that way. I think the people really like that. It's a there's a certain thing about that people like that kind of authoritative. This guy, says it how it is. This is the ultimate. He's got the truth. He's got. but it's not real, and so it's not real. So I
Yeah,
think you do have to find a balance, right? You want to
yeah.
be authoritative. You want to be authoritative at the same time, you know, but if you are speaking, it is your opinion. It's, except that there are always those people who, when they speak, it's not their opinion, right? It's, they claim it's the opinion. They're kind of holding that it's the opinion of God Himself, and that's dangerous. So
It's
I'd rather be accused of being too humble than being too arrogant.
that's very, very, very important. That's very interesting. And I'm just last thing before Dr. Lali, you take over. It's interesting that the other day I think I was responding to a question or what. Um, I was addressing this real serious problem as to why is it that many of the Muslim religious speakers, scholars, they are so strong, at times harsh in their tone, that you many people they repel. Uh, and my one of the reasons I mentioned was that uh, they read the Quran, and because in the Quran, the Almighty, on many occasions, is very strong in tone. And these people who read the Quran and then they speak to people, they position themselves in the place of the Almighty. Now, I think this is a huge blunder.
Hmm.
All that you can do is that this is what the Quran says. And I'm sure that what the Quran says has always a context. But imagine if somebody puts himself in the position of the Almighty and starts speaking. Wow. And I'm telling you, that is how many speakers speak. And they don't realize that they don't have that authority. And it causes huge damage. It's seriously problematic. Not only that, there are divisions after divisions, sects and factions after factions that get created. Many intelligent, good, well-meaning people are drawn away from religion.
Yeah.
That's
Yes,
so
Dr. Ali.
that I have to say something. That is an incredible point. Because the same is true in the Torah, right? In Torah, God also speaks, in this very like tough tone, and people think, okay, I'm gonna position myself, and it's exactly as you said, I'm gonna position myself like that, and I'm gonna give them the God's eye view, right? And that's dangerous from so many perspectives. I mean, because that's not our job, right? Our job is to be human beings, right? Addressing human beings, addressing addressing what it is that God said to us, which is very different from like speaking for God. And what goes on inside of a person when they start to look down on the world, right? Through the through what they think is a God's eye perspective and speak from God's perspective. That's a very good point. We have a couple of those too. And it's, you know, they're consigning everybody to hell and everything as if they get a vote, you know. Dr. Lele.
Thank you both so much. That amazing questions, amazing answers. Some really great points you've made, and I'm not sure what I can add really, but just one thing that I mentioned it last week, and I'd like to mention it again, is that in my opinion, I believe that religious teachers, they they do embody like a leader, and sort of people expect them to lead by example, which you did mention this. And I think it's so important for us to, or for everybody, to all teachers, to think what is my intention, what am I trying to do here, it's so easy for the ego to get in the way and prevent a religious teacher from really doing what their purpose is, what God, expects them to do. And it's a huge responsibility. And actually, I feel sorry for, people who have this responsibility. It's like, why would you want this? It is a massive, massive responsibility. And as you mentioned, so many people are turning away from religion because of the way that the teachers and leaders are, not leading by example. And, if I think let's question ourselves, what is our intention? If our intention is sort of to lead by example and to create unity rather than division, to inspire people to find that teacher within themselves, and to connect really to their creator. That I think that should be the number one purpose of the sincere intention of any religious leader should be to help guide others by example, and also with good communication skills, something that I really don't have. But anyway, to try to speak well in a way that the other person understands, to try and guide them to connect with their creator and have that direct relationship. And it's so, so easy for the ego to get in the way and for people to want to put themselves in between that student or whoever you're teaching and the Almighty, our Creator, who wants to have an intimate relationship with every single person, and in a palpable way. It's so easy for the ego to get in the way, and I think that is, so humility, as you said, is the key. You've been teaching recently, Rabbi Wiseman, about humility and what, the meaning of true humility, and actually, I completely agree. Some of the points you said is that humility, a humble teacher should be aware of their strengths, and actually be able to use those strengths to serve God and to serve the people and to help teach, and to also be aware of their weaknesses. And if we're trying to inspire, if we all try to inspire each other to love and peace and justice and truth, really, it shouldn't matter whether even we look stupid or if we are wrong in front of other people. If you really want to guide people to truth, then we have to get that ego out the way. And actually, I think encourage our students to seek truth and to say that we might be wrong. Don't just believe everything I say. Seek truth yourself, and ask your creator to guide you, and to inspire people to sort of walk the ways of peace. We have to try to do that ourselves. So obviously the attributes of peace, in my opinion, would be to include, obviously we have to deal with everything in a way that's just and fair, have integrity. If we're going to teach people, ask people to sort of not go for materialistic wealth, but to seek knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, then it doesn't look good if you're, living in a massive mansion and have 10 cars on your drive. Things like this, people, it makes such a big difference on people. And it puts people off religion, and it puts people off believing in God, which is such a shame. It's such a shame because that's I think obviously a religious teacher should, I think their intention should be to sort of be like a shepherd, to try and guide their flock to their creator, because they see the healing power, and they want the well-being of all their students, and they don't have the authority to heal except if what God gives us. So I think I'm just repeating my points.
Dr. Khalid and I are going to be
Yeah.
getting rid of our Khalid and I are going to be getting rid of our collection of Rolls Royces, and that's it. We're divesting ourselves of all the Rolls Royces, and
The
thank you so much.
mansion is going to be a little difficult to dispose of very soon.
Yes, so we're gonna have to hold on to a few of them, just a few of them. But did you mention liking and subscribing? You have to mention liking and subscribing. Okay, down below, like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. See, I'm very good at this. I know how to do this stuff. I just point
Yeah.
down. Okay.
I loved your point as well about saying that, you know, I think part of integrity is when we make mistakes is to be open about it and to, you know, say that we're struggling too, just like everybody else. You know, we're all in this together, aren't we? So, yeah, and that's part of really giving students the strength to sort of get back up on their feet is to show them that you're in that battle with them. You're on the battlefield. You're not just standing and watching. You know, you're with them and you're fighting with them, and you know that's a big part of it, I think. So you know, what can we do? What would you advise all the religious leaders that are, or teachers that are out there, how to sort of you're really good at practical tips. What can we do? What practical tips would you advise? 5 practical tips for religious teachers to, just to summarize this talk. Rabbi.
This,
Five? Okay.
yeah.
You want 5? Okay. I'll give you 5 quick.
Just quick 5 points.
Quick, 5. Okay. 1, say you don't know. Okay. Never call a student stupid. Never call somebody stupid. Never tell somebody that they can't ask a question. Actually listen when somebody asks a question or when they offer their opinion. And beyond everything else, okay, you should say to your students, never believe anything I say because I say it. Never believe anything I say just because I say it. That's it. 5 things. 1,
Yeah.
2.
Excellent.
Amazing, excellent. Thank
Excellent.
you. Do you have any final questions, Dr. Zaheer, or?
No, I'm now, already worried about my next presentation. So I
Okay.
would say nothing.
He's working. He's thinking. So we'll be back next week,
Yeah.
and for more.
Yeah,
Thank you.
you.
Inshallah. Yes. Thank you
Inshallah.
very much.
Okay, peace and blessings. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.